welcome to the Next in Line podcast, where we are helping to prepare you for whatever is next in line. As always, I am your host, Chance Pitts, and I would like to thank you for tuning into this episode. Guys and gals, welcome into another episode of the Next in Line podcast. We're back here on Thoughtful Thursday. It's going to be a little bit different of a format today, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. Guys, as always, the housekeeping first and foremost. If you receive value from this episode or any other episode of the Next in Line podcast, I would ask that you share the show with like-minded individuals who might be able to get the same kind of value that you do. That's the number one way for us to grow and move this thing in a positive direction so we can reach more people and, guys, in effect, help more people. Additionally, another way you can do that is by leaving a rating, review, liking, subscribing, commenting, and interacting with us on whatever platform you find yourself listening on. Next, guys, check us out on social media for some awesome content. Also, we've had several people reach out this week with some cool words of encouragement, so that's awesome to see. So if you ever want to reach out to us, if you ever have any questions, or you just want to see some cool content for personal development, fitness, or mindset kind of training, just check us out at Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. That's at Next in Line Development on each of those platforms. Now, guys, I said this was going to be a little bit different of a format, and what I meant by that is I typically kind of tread lightly on anything that's political or anything that's hot topics in the news that kind of create division or bring people to one side or another, create some kind of polarized viewpoints on certain topics. But I feel that this one today is one that we need to really take on just head on. It's a tough situation that I think a lot of people are going to have opinions on. Some people are going to appreciate me talking about it. Some people are not going to appreciate it, but that's kind of the direction I want to take with the show. Is I want to talk about things that are going to help move our society as a whole in a positive direction. I want to talk about things that are going to help people develop and move their lives in a positive direction as well. And I think this is one that is right up that alley. Where this whole topic came from actually was a conversation I had with my dad just a little bit ago, and it really wasn't relevant until I was working out today, and I thought about some of the similarities as I was listening to a podcast that was discussing one of the biggest and latest atrocities that we've seen in this country, the Greenwood Park Mall shooting. I know we've seen a lot of these mass shooting type situations popping up. I know everybody's somewhat tired of talking about them, but the truth is, if we never really address the root cause of what's going on here, and we don't really address the things that are within society's control as a whole, then we're never going to come to a true solution on this thing. Whether you err on the side of gun control, whether you err on the side of pro-gun, whether you err on the side of mental health and needing to beef up that side of society, I think you're going to find this podcast very relevant. And I hope that you keep an open mind as we navigate through this situation. Now, guys, laying out what happened at the Greenwood Mall for those that aren't familiar with it. A young man walked into the Greenwood Park Mall in Indiana, and he had two firearms with him. One of them was broken down and concealed in a backpack. He walked straight in the door, went to the food court, went to the restroom at the food court, walked in there, stayed for about an hour and 2 minutes, assembling firearm, prepping his magazines out and all his gear. At which point, when that hour and 2 minutes was up, he decided to leave the restroom, walk into the food court, and open fire. He, unfortunately and very sadly, took the life of 3 individuals who were in the food court. I believe there was others injured as well. However, after a couple of minutes or some seconds, it depends on which news source you listen to, he was subdued by a 22-year-old with a firearm that was licensed to carry in the mall. I don't believe he was legally carrying in the mall. That's, of course, another thing that everybody's trying to argue about and throw around. However, it really doesn't matter. A good Samaritan with a firearm put down a evil individual who was committing another mass shooting here in the United States. And while we could sit here and we could debate all day around gun control, whether that kid should have had one in the first place to be able to commit the mass shooting, whether the kid should have had one to be able to prevent the shooter from killing any more people whenever he was able to subdue the shooter, it really, honestly, in that regard, is not what I want to talk about today. That's not what I think the root cause of this whole situation is. Because let's be honest, we didn't see these kind of issues. We didn't see these kind of mass shootings and murders by young kids and by guys that seem somewhat desperate out there back in the day, I guess you could call it. Back whenever we were young, before my time even, whenever I was old enough to understand these things. We just didn't see those kind of things. And I believe it's caused by a major shift in society that we really need to evaluate and we really need to look at. And I think that conversation is rooted in mental health. Now, before you freak out like I'm going to be some kind of hippie talking about love everyone and everybody needs to get along and all that good stuff, that's really not what the case is here. I really want to have a conversation, a serious one, about mental fortitude, about men talking to other men, about people talking to other people. Our society, I feel like, has alienated all of the individuals and divided all of them in so many different ways that people don't feel like they can have conversations with each other. And that's where this whole thing actually started. You see, my dad reached out to me a few weeks back after he had kind of an odd experience. He was traveling for work. He stopped at the mall to do a little bit of work on his laptop in his work vehicle, then went inside to go check out a book. And while he was there looking for a book, he walked into the restroom. Just like normal, unexpected stop. Didn't plan on being there for any reason, any amount of time. But while he was in there, something happened. He was there for a reason, in my opinion. Because a young man about my age, 25, 26 years old, walked in there and was visibly distraught. He was crying. He was upset. He was not in a good place mentally at all. And my dad, instead of doing what I think probably 99% of us would have done, which is running out of the bathroom away from that situation, stopped and asked this kid what was wrong. He stopped and he had a conversation with this kid. And it turned out that this kid had just lost his job. He was in a tight financial spot, and actually his wife was leaving him with their 2 kids. He felt like he had nowhere to go. He felt like he had no one to talk to. He had no options. He was freaking out, and he did not know what to do. He had all of this energy. He had all of this emotion and no outlet to put it into. So very quickly, he unloaded on my dad with all of this at once. He didn't know what to do. He was seeking advice. He was freaking out. Like I said, guys, it was a very emotional and very probably uncomfortable situation for my dad, even though he raised 2 young guys that have been in their own situations and in weird spots in life before. But what my dad did was he stopped and he remained in a place of positivity. He didn't criticize the kid for getting himself into these situations. He didn't put the kid down. He didn't try to give him any kind of constructive criticism or advice from a negative place. He didn't look for clout on social media by posting it all over there whenever the conversation was over. No, he just remained positive. He gave this kid an outlet to talk, and he gave the kid an opportunity to really unpack the situation emotionally. He gave him someone to talk to, and he gave him an outlet for the entire situation. And at the end of it, the kid was in a much better place. Now, the reason I am bringing that specific conversation up is because I did not realize the similarities between that situation and the gravity that was around this conversation my dad had with this young man in Temple that day. Because some other things about this situation up at the Greenwood Park Mall with this shooter is this individual, like I said, went into the bathroom, stayed there for an hour and 2 minutes in the mall. He had no history, apparently, of doing anything like this. His family had no idea that he would be prone to any kind of violence. He never exhibited those kind of actions or behaviors. And guys, he had a kind of dire situation as well. Now, I'm not justifying anything that he did in the form of this shooting or any of his actions or where he put that emotion, but he did have some underlying issues going on in his life. I believe he had just lost his job. There was an eviction notice on the house door whenever investigators went to look for it. So it was a tough situation for him. And in some ways, it kind of made me wonder that maybe he didn't have a place to put this energy, this emotion, an outlet to have these things. And all of it built up and became overwhelming, and it just kind of became bigger and bigger and bigger until it exploded into the situation that we see happen at the Greenwood Park Mall in Indiana with the mass shooting. Now, like I said, guys, I'm not justifying any of these actions, but it kind of just brings this whole conversation of mental health a little bit more into perspective. Because I'm not saying in any way that that kid in Temple that my dad had this conversation with had a propensity for evil in the same way that this kid up in Indiana did. However, who knows what would have happened had my dad not been there to give this kid an outlet for this energy, an outlet for this emotion. So what I really think the root cause of a lot of these things, like I said, regardless of gun control conversations and political conversations, is the huge gap that we have in mental health and what we do for other people and how we care for other people in this society today. And like I said, I don't know if that kid in Temple would have had any kind of emotional outlash or just kind of evil thing come out of this whole situation that he found himself in either. But I know that because my dad was willing to have a conversation for him, he probably prevented that kid from doing something stupid in some way. And I'm a strong believer that whenever an individual goes and they commit some kind of evil act, this isn't just a black and white thing. This isn't just a flip of the switch. I'm going to go have this evil situation occur. I'm going to commit these atrocities and there's no thought about it. It's what I'm going to do 100% committed. To me, if this kid went in there to the restroom for an hour, it shows that he was probably in a situation of debate within himself. He was probably in a situation where he was trying to figure out what he was going to do. He was trying to convince himself to go out there and commit this act that he had committed to with these firearms and this evil situation. And the reason I'm bringing that up, guys, is not to lend credence to anything that he did, but you're telling me that at some point of this kid walking into this mall to commit this evil act, at some point of him walking into the mall or being in the restroom or even walking back out of the restroom, that somebody in the mall did not see something in his eye. They didn't see something on his face that was a dead giveaway to the pain and the emotion and the energy that he had within him in his life. Nobody saw that this kid was prepared to do this terrible, terrible thing out of nowhere and could have said something to him. Couldn't have taken this action that my father took with this kid in Temple. Now, like I said, guys, my dad didn't do this for clout. He didn't do it because he thought it was a cool thing to do or he wanted to be the old man that gave the advice or criticized this kid for the decisions that he made in his life. No, he did it out of love. He did it out of just genuinely caring for the kid and his situation because he understood he'd been through some things in the past too, and he knew that he needed an outlet as well. So, to me, the bigger case here, guys, is that nobody really genuinely cares for each other anymore. I feel like nobody in this country is willing to say the things that need to be said to others. Nobody's willing to have the conversations that need to be had. And we all get tied up into this virtual signaling bullshit that everyone always wants to act like they're really emotionally engaged in everything everybody does. They want to act like everybody's there, but it's really not the case. We see it in government. We see it with our politicians. We see it with the people that come in and say they're going to do all these great things to combat all the issues that we have, whether they're racial, whether they're due to financial situations with everyone else. Maybe it's some situation with climate control. Whatever you buy into and whatever you think is the major issues in America that are facing us morally, everybody says they're going to come fix it whenever they get into office. However, they sell their position to the highest bidder as soon as they get into office. There's nobody that genuinely, there's very few people that genuinely go into office with the intent of actually having some kind of change anymore. Nobody really genuinely cares about making this country and making the people within it better. And that's something we all have to start subscribing to and we all have to do a better job of. And guys, this isn't just me getting on here and yelling at you about this today. I need to do a better job of this myself. I've tried to become way more action-oriented whenever I see somebody going through a situation that is tough. I try to have the hard conversation whenever I see people struggling. If I've got somebody that I can be there for, I really strive to do so. I try to listen openly. I try to not just give advice blindly from a position of superiority. I try to actually genuinely provide solutions or just be a listening ear for the individual. And it's in the same way, let's talk about just the other problems that we see that we face in America right now. We see this huge problem of obesity in America. And we've got this standard of operation now where we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or it's an uncomfortable situation, kind of like what we see here with probably nobody wanting to talk to this kid that looked upset and looked bothered by things and looked like he was going through this whirlwind of emotions. But nobody wants to talk about the uncomfortable things anymore. We've got a major problem with obesity in our country that's killing people. It's killing children. They're having childhood issues due to overweight style of living. And nobody wants to say anything because it's not the comfortable thing to do anymore. It's really a subpar version of America that we are creating culturally because of what we are doing and what we are not willing to do, I guess is another way of putting that. What we're not willing to say. Everybody wants to be coddled, and we want to have this kind of mentality where things are just handed to everyone. Now, there is a whole different caveat to this story that I will talk about as well, and that's that in a lot of ways we don't fully know this kid, but I would also think that he'd never really had to force his way through adversity. I think that one thing culture does nowadays is we created this whole idea of the participation trophy and the everyone gets their way, everyone can't be wrong, nobody can be criticized, we have to support all the children and make sure they're right no matter how bad their answers are or how bad they do. If they finish 7th place, they're still a winner too, kind of mentality. And we can't have that in life, in my opinion, because whenever we do that, we start to not let these people understand how to lose in situations. And talking to my dad on the phone this morning, that's something that he kind of picked up on from the kid in the Temple library as well, is that the kid really didn't seem like he'd ever had to go through anything hard before, and he didn't know how to handle it. We literally are creating a society of people that don't understand how to deal with the things in their lives and how to deal with the hardships that they face. Now, I'm not saying I'm some kind of just person that's gone through all this crap, but guys, I've been through a lot in my own regard. I've been very fortunate to have 2 great parents and have a support system and have people that have taught me to go through this process, but a lot of society today isn't that way, and I think a lot of us could agree on that specifically. I think that we really need to start approaching how we treat people in a different way. And guys, there's always 2 sides to the story. We could argue about gun control. We could argue about mental health. We could argue about how this kid didn't do anything to better his situation, and he just let himself get worse and worse until he finally got to a point of having to do something drastic to feel like he was in control of his life, like committing a mass shooting in this evil act. But at the end of the day and at the end of this conversation, we really have to understand that we aren't doing enough. We aren't doing enough for mental health. We aren't doing enough for others. We aren't doing enough for society as a whole and this culture that we've created in America. We truly need to understand that we have to try to understand people. We've got to try to help people for the sake of helping people. We've got to genuinely engage with them with the hopes of a positive outcome. It can't just be this garbage where we're just doing so because it's the popular thing to do and we want to film it and put it on social media, or we want to make a Facebook post about it. No, that's not what you do. That's not actively engaging. That's not following up with them to make sure they're still doing good and that they don't need somebody because you already know they have a tendency to not reach out whenever they need somebody. No, we need to engage. We need to stick with it, and we need to continue to try to make this country a better place for people mentally. I'm not saying coddle people. I'm not saying create the participation trophy mentality. I'm saying let's have a true and genuine conversation about mental health, and let's have a true and genuine conversation about life being tough and things not always being easy. And guys, that's my 2 cents on this whole Greenwood Park mall shooting. I think that we need to really approach things differently. I think we need to have these conversations. When you see someone struggling, when you see someone going through a hard situation, reach out. Talk to them, guys. I know I'm going to try to do a much better job of going into this situation with that mindset. Anytime I see somebody struggling, whether it's on social media, whether it's in the gym, whether it's in just everyday life, in my job, whatever it is. I'm going to try to have these conversations because I want to create the most positive outcome that I can for that individual and for society as a whole. Guys, that's all I've got for you today on this Thoughtful Thursday. Thank you for tuning into this podcast. Remember to share the show, guys, if you got something out of it. Also, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And guys, always be prepared for whatever is next in line.